Good morning. My name is Paul Cronin. I'm the CEO and Managing Director of Adriatic Metals. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me today. I'd like to talk you through what I think is a very exciting development project in Bosnia and Herzegovina and ultimately across the Balkans. Adriatic Metals was set up in 2017 to specifically acquire a high-grade polymetallic project in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But ultimately, the strategy for the company was not just to have a single asset mine in production, but rather to utilize a similar sort of structure where we would acquire former Yugoslav assets that had, for a number of reasons, geopolitical and conflict, been essentially forgotten about, and give those projects modern exploration techniques to expand the resources and bring them through that production cycle relatively quickly. Our intention was never to just have one project. Our intention was to always look for other projects of similar characteristics, where in the Yugoslav era, drilling had been typically shallow, a lot of adits had been developed, so there was a lot of information available, but that information wasn't readily available in a form that could be used. Confirmation work needed to be done, both on drilling results as well as on metallurgy. But those assets were relatively advanced and had extensive information available about them that a good team could pick them up and bring them forward. In addition to our high-grade assets in Bosnia, which are now well and truly on the development cycle, we have announced in May that we have acquired Tethyan Resources of Canada. Again, this is a project where historically a lot of work has been done on the project. Tethyan had been very successful in consolidating a significant land area in southern Serbia, but were missing two key parts of those licenses. And when they announced in March that they had actually completed an agreement to acquire those licenses, we saw that as a great opportunity to pick up our first pipeline project in the region and start putting that on the development cycle as well. Very pleased to announce that Tethyan has already commenced confirmation drilling on those new assets, and that project is moving ahead very, very quickly. The Balkans sits on the edge of the Tethyan mineral belt, one of the most prolific mineral belts in the world. It has excellent infrastructure. It hosts a number of tier 1 deposits with major mining companies such as Rio Tinto, Dundee Precious Metals and Zinjan, all working in the area. And what we've tend to find is that there is a very strong history of mining in this region and a very highly skilled workforce who know exactly what they're doing. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a fantastic jurisdiction, a very clear and concise mining code, a low corporations tax rate, very supportive public and government. And Serbia, which enacted a new mining code in December 2015, has equally favourable fiscal regime and a very, very familiar mining code to most investors. Our prime asset is the Rupice high-grade polymetallic asset. This asset was actually discovered in the 1960s and drilled quite extensively in the 1980s and early 1990s. But at the outbreak of conflict in Bosnia, all of the work on this exploration project ceased. All of the data was later accumulated and archived. We were very fortunate to be able to find a lot of that data, to digitize it and analyze it. And what we started to recognize straight away was that exploration in the Yugoslav was typically for a specific purpose. If the government needed lead and zinc, they looked for lead and zinc. And rarely were drill hole assays ever tested for anything other than the metals that they were looking for. In the case of Rupice, it was for lead, zinc, and barite. But what we now know is there's significant amounts of gold and silver, and in particular silver, where precious metals make up now over 50% of the in situ value of that resource. Rupice is a unique deposit, very high grade. It currently has a JORC resource that was done in May 2019 of 9.4 million tonnes. Over 80% of that is indicated, with an average grade on a gold equivalent basis of around 13 grams per tonne. The mineralisation is strata bound and heavily structurally controlled. It starts near surface but extends to about 300 metres below surface. We have now done over 30,000 metres of drilling, and since we've done the resource in 2019, we've done nearly a further 20,000 metres of drilling, and we'll be putting out a new resource in September along with a pre-feasibility study. The Vares project itself, however, makes up two deposits. Rupice, the high-grade polymetallic deposit, as I just mentioned, but also Veovaca, a VMS deposit that sits about 12 kilometres away as the crow flies from Rupice. Veovaca was formerly in production. It has power, it has rail, it has road, it has a tailings dam. It has a plant site that requires some reconstruction, but it is a project that is in a designated mining area and will be easy to put back into production. The lower grade nature of Veovaca means that it's not the prize in this project, but from an environmental and from permitting standpoint, Veovaca is critical to the Vares project in that it makes the development of the project so much easier from an environmental and permitting perspective. The economics of the combined project, where we mine Rupice first, and then after about a 10-year mine life, begin to mine Veovaca, provides at an internal rate of return of over 107% on relatively modest capex of below 180 million, returning an NPV8 of over $900 million US. As you can see from the project cash flow graph on the left-hand side of this slide, the cash flows in the early project years are extreme. It generates over $1 billion of free cash flow in its first 5 years of operation. The expansion of the resource, that work that we've done over the past 12 months, will ensure that those higher cash flows extend out further. But it is a very, very compelling project. It has relatively low operating costs, and the capital expenditure that we've assumed there of 178.4 million includes a 30% contingency. The ore feeding into the mine in the first 5 years is from the northern end of the deposit, where grades are the highest, but also you have the thickest mining intervals. As you can see, over time, the grade starts to decline, but the reality of mining such high-grade material in its first 5 or 6 years of operation means that you have a very, very valuable project. But as I alluded to, Rupice is not just about the 9.4 million tonnes that we already have under a JORC resource. We've been extending the deposit to the north, extending it to the south and southeast, where we've continued to drill through significant high-grade intercepts of massive sulfide mineralization. More recently, over to the east of the deposit, we've drilled deeper and we found a new possible lens of mineralization, which we're testing at the moment, and hope that over time, and as our understanding of the structure of this deposit increases, we will be able to continually increase the amount of tonnes that are available for mining at this fantastic Rupice deposit. In addition to what we have at Rupice, we are also conducting exploration on 2 areas on the Rupice license at Jurassic Brestic and at Bodovica. We've started drilling at Bodovica about 2 weeks ago. Jurassic Brestic has an extensive array of adits that were constructed in the 1990s where grab samples have indicated extremely high-grade mineralisation. We're continuing to conduct further drilling at both of those sites, and we'll look to try and put a resource on those projects either later this year or early next year. We've also started regional sampling on areas around the old Veovaca pit, but also across the region to try and understand what the extent of mineralisation here is around the town of Vares, which was an old mining town created when a large iron ore deposit was discovered in the mid-1800s. In addition to the projects we have in Bosnia, we will be acquiring through a Canadian plan of arrangement the very exciting Kizovac and Sistaci assets in southern Serbia, currently owned by Tethyan Resources, but we have a definitive agreement for an acquisition of Tethyan, which should close in August this year. The historical, and I will point out these are historical resources at Kizovac and Sistaci, around about 7.5 million tonnes, but they are shallow. Very few of the assays have been tested for gold or silver, and like the Rupice deposit, we're confident that as we go in and drill that deposit out, we will find additional gold as well as additional silver that we can bring into a resource there. Internally, we have high expectations for Kizovac. The confirmation drilling program extends about 1.2 kilometres from the southeast of the previously shallow open pit, but mineralisation is visible in the pit and beyond the pit to the northwest. We believe the entire strike length there is around 2.7 kilometres. Most importantly about Kizovac and Sistaci is under the Serbian spatial plan, they have been designated for mining, and therefore the permitting path for those projects is going to be very, very quick. Confirmation drilling has commenced. We have already completed 6 confirmation holes on the project. The confirmation program should be complete in late August or early September, at which point we will close the merger and we will continue to extend that mineralisation to the northwest as far as we can. I think this is a particularly exciting project given it's got very, very clean metallurgy and it's also very, very shallow. So we're expecting that those average grades that have been calculated in the historical resource will continue. In fact, expect to see an increase in the silver grades, which will make this a very exciting project that can be brought into production about 2 years after the Vores project. Since our incorporation in 2017, we have continued to deliver on milestones. We've completed our initial resource drilling at Rupice. We have now completed fairly substantial expansion drilling. We are in the process of updating our mineral resource estimate to include that drilling work that has occurred in the latter half of 2019 and the first half of 2020. And we are in the process of applying for our mining permit. We recently received our exploration permit, which is the most difficult permit to achieve in Bosnia. And we are expecting our urban planning permit and our mining permit to follow before the end of August this year. We have also completed the scoping study and are now headlong into the pre-feasibility study, which was being conducted by Ausenco out of Canada, as well as our international ESIA. We intend to complete the pre-feasibility study in September and then quickly move into a definitive feasibility study in Q1 next year. Whilst all of that's going on, our explorations team is still focused on regional exploration at Bodovica, Jurassic Brestic, but also across the entire region, looking for areas where we may be able to put new concessions on, which will enable us to expand our land holding there and ultimately define more resources that could be brought into that central plant at Veovaca. At Tethyan, as I mentioned, the confirmation drill program is underway. We expect to have a mineral resource estimate on that project in either late 2020 or early 2021. We'll commence metallurgical test work later in Q3, and then ultimately put that project through a scoping study and be able to demonstrate what the economics of that project will look like, particularly when combined with the economics of the high-grade Vares project in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We've made substantial progress with our permitting on the Vares project, and we'll continue to make good progress. We are expecting to have our mining permit for Veovaca in August and for Rupice later this year. And then we can move on to the operations phase, where we then submit a feasibility study and additional details, and then make our application to construct the plant. We expect all of that to be complete in Q1 next year. The reason we have been so successful in gaining our permits is because we have a strong environmental, social and governance pathway that we engaged one of London's best ESG consulting firms to help us define early last year. As part of that, we are working with local community on human resource development strategies, on procurement policies. We have a number of sponsorship initiatives that have really aligned the company and the local community, and we have fantastic support from that local community for what we're doing. We now have 49 staff in Bosnia. Only one of those staff are an expat, and we'll continue to look at ways we can recruit, train, and develop the talent pool that is available to us in Bosnia and Herzegovina to make sure that this mine has a long and sustainable economic benefit to that community. And that their ongoing partnerships between the local community and the company continue. We've put together a world-class team led by Peter Bilby, a non-executive chairman, who is also the chairman of Independence Group, one of Australia's largest companies. Michael Rawlinson, who is was a former head of metals and mining for Barclays Bank and one of the founders of Libram Capital. Julian Barnes, former Dundee Precious Metals and RSG Group, knows more about exploration in the Balkans than probably any man on the planet. And more recently, we've added Sandra Bates, an experienced corporate finance lawyer in London and Australia, and John Richards, an experienced investment banker. Our management team consists of myself and Graham Hill. Graham has built 7 mines around the world over the course of his career, which began with Anglo American. Jeff Eyre joined us in January. He's a steady set of hands running the finances of the company. In December, we recruited Phil Fox. Phil has worked extensively in the Balkans, but also has a lot of experience in deposits very similar to that of Rupice. And we're very excited to say that Fabian Baker, the current chief executive of Tethyan Resources, will be joining us in August as the head of corporate development. Fabian has worked extensively on the Tethyan mineral belt and will be very valuable to us in terms of executing our strategy of bringing that next pipeline asset to fruition. Adriatic as a share has done particularly well. Since its IPO'd in May 2018, the share price has continued to appreciate. Obviously, we've had a COVID blip, but we expect that share price will continue to appreciate as we continue to deliver on those milestones. Our registry is made up of a good mix of management, retail, institutional, and we have a strategic investor in Sandfire Resources of Australia, who currently hold a little over 16% of the company. So in summary, both projects have very attractive economics. Both are in very high quality mining jurisdictions and are only 200 kilometres apart. There are going to be some excellent operational synergies to be had, and we have an extensive portfolio of prospective exploration targets in both countries. Adriatic's cash position leaves us well placed to bring both assets through that development curve quickly, and we have a well-defined permitting route, good regional infrastructure, and experienced teams across both companies. Thank you very much for your time.